Hi, this is Mark Ryman, the agronomist at the Monsanto Water Utilization Learning Center in Gothenburg, Nebraska. And today our topic on irrigation is preseason, pivot, and linear maintenance. For us, it's been a long winter. The pivots have been standing out there all season long in the rain and the snow and cold, and we want to get off to a good start. Getting a start on maintenance is a great way to get off to that successful start to an irrigation season. It really lets you review what happened last year. You can take a close look and think about the field. Were there any issues with this pivot that needed corrected? And kind of go through those things before you get off to that season start. Maybe you notice some inconsistencies in your irrigation. It ensures that the system is in working order before crops need it. It's not a great idea when your crops really need that water there, maybe in late June or early July, to try and be servicing that system. It enables you to get a good look at the system components before there's a crop in the way. We all know that it's no fun to really work out in the corn, correcting things like gearbox issues when the season starts. And it's really a cost-effective way to do parts and maintenance because you're not looking at rush shipping or things like that to get the parts that you need. So I put together a little bit of a preseason checklist to go off of. The first and a very important step is to review your owner's or operator's manual and make sure that you're hitting all the points that they want you to. In general, the next thing to do is ensure that all power is disconnected and locked off. This helps isolate your pivot or linear, making sure electricity is not flowing to it while you inspect it. Next, check that the system electrical ground and bonding ground wires are in place. This is one for our linear that's attached to the ground. The bonding ground wires connect the spans, making sure that they come back to your ground wire. And then additionally on our linears, we also have to inspect the power cords to make sure that they're in good shape and potentially repair any defects that we find before the beginning of the irrigation season. For pivots specifically, make sure that the center of the machine doesn't have any loose bolts and is still anchored to the ground, providing a stable base for the pivot. Pay special attention to the center bearing, making sure to grease it, and then later in the inspection process, after you've moved the pivot 180 degrees, greasing the other side of it to make sure that it's properly lubricated to get the season started. Then check for gearbox leaks and service the wheel and center drive gearboxes. To check for leaks, look for oil spots on the rims or on the ground indicating that a seal's out, and maybe you need to address something more serious with that gearbox. General service would include loosening the lower oil plug just enough to allow water and condensate to drip out and retightening it once it stops. This is also necessary for the center drive gearboxes. Then, to make sure that the oil levels are high enough, you would open the upper plug on the center drive gearboxes and the wheel gearboxes and make sure that they're filled to the correct level with the proper gear lube. Inspect wheels and tires for condition, inflation, and lug nut tightness. Typical pressure ranges for wheels range from about 15 to 35 psi, and that information can be found in your owner's manual. At the same time, you'll also want to check those tires for condition to make sure that they're not excessively cracked or at risk for going flat during the growing season. At this time, it's also a good idea to inspect your lug nuts for looseness and retorque them to the specification listed in your owner's manual. Verify the condition of drive shafts, U-joints, and the shielding over the drive shaft. Simply take a minute to look at the shield, pull it back, get in there and look at that U-joint, see if there's any play in it, and see if there's any components that might need replaced before moving the shield back over it. There are some older drive shafts that may require lubrication, and this would be some information that you can find in your user manual. Take some time to do a preliminary inspection of all hoses, drains, clamps, gaskets, and sprinklers before putting water through the system. This is a great time to look at nozzles, the drops, the goosenecks, and really any other conduit of water to make sure they're in good shape. Another important thing at this time is really to dig out your nozzle chart for the pivot or the linear system and make sure everything's in the order it's supposed to be. In this case, the color on the chart indicates the nozzle type and the gallons per minute and flow that the nozzle should have and that the irrigation system was developed for. The wear pad would be indicated by a number and the color of the wear pad. You can make sure those are right. And then the pressure regulators. In this case, the 10M indicates 10 psi on the pressure regulators. It's important to make sure that all these are in order because over time, as something happens, maybe we switch out something at one point or another that's not supposed to be there, and that affects our uniformity in the distribution of water through that system. In extreme cases, when you look at imagery like this, you can notice issues in an arc pattern indicating uneven water distribution. Even if it's a new pivot, it might be worth your time to take a look because this imagery actually came from a field where the company that installed the pivot actually put the nozzles on incorrectly and put, inner nozzles on the outside of the pivot, leading to poor water distribution and too little water in some places and too much water in others. Finally, it's time to run water through the pivot and check for leaks, plug sprinklers, and ones that don't spray correctly. If they don't spray correctly, take a look at the pad and make sure the grooves and everything seems to be working right. Or look at the nozzles to make sure that there's not excessive wear and certainly that there's no plugging. Or take a look at the pressure regulators. Make sure that they're in the correct direction and that there's nothing blocking the top. On occasion, you can see pressure regulators fail in the field. If you suspect that one's putting out too much water or not maintaining the right pressure, talk to your pivot dealer and usually they can help you troubleshoot that. Another thing that you're going to notice easily walking through the field are maybe rotators that don't work and other nozzle problems that it'll be good to correct before the growing season starts. Use the opportunity of having water in the system to empty the sand trap and ensure that all drains open properly on water shutdown. The sand trap is usually located at the end of the machine and can be removed by taking a clamp out and letting the water and debris drain out of it. It's also important to check those drains at each tower to ensure that they properly drain the system. If they're plugged up, disassemble the drain and remove any debris that you might find. That debris, potentially, if it's not removed, could end up in your sprinklers, clogging them while you're trying to water your crops. Finally, you're ready to re-energize the system and check alignment, system safeties, and barricades. Alignment can be watched as the system moves through the field to ensure that the towers stay generally in line. If you find that you need to adjust the alignment, your operator's manual should have instructions for your brand of pivot. Then make sure that the system safeties work. The ones that contact the barricade are important to stop the system, but on our linears we also have ones to prevent pulling the electrical cord too hard and things like that that are a little bit specialized. Finally then, you want to make sure your barricades are in good shape. Over the winter, badgers can dig around them or they can get hit by equipment and moved around so that they won't stop the pivot. This is really an important thing to take a look at physically before you start the season so you don't end up with a pivot going off course. This is by no means an exhaustive checklist, but it should get you off to a good start, and you can consult your owner's manual for other issues that you may need to address on your pivot. The one thing I do want to stress is this is probably the only time that you're going to address that uniformity during the growing season. So really check out those nozzles, make sure they match your pivot package, and get the best and most efficient application out of that system that you can. This is Mark Ryman. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to sharing more information with you about irrigation and other topics in the future.
For more information on this topic, you can download the Monsanto Irrigation Handbook for the Great Plains by using the following address. You can also download a specific research report by visiting the Gothenburg Learning Center website. This video was produced by the Monsanto Water Utilization Learning Center.